Zunda. So I briefly introduce you and encourage the students to ask questions after your discussion. And I'm very happy that you agreed to speak here, and I'm very happy for this opportunity, and looking forward to hear what you have to say. So please.
Toda rabba, Yoni. I will switch to English now. We lived as a family for a year in Haifa, and our boys went to, as I think Yoni just said to you, and our boys went to Jewish secular school, so they know Hebrew well, but I don't. My sons tell me that I cannot even pronounce the name Nadav correctly. When I was asking my son, how is your friend Nadav doing? He said, it's not Nadav, it's Nadav. And so they were making constantly fun of me, and so I'm glad to switch to English, or not even to begin with Hebrew. But I will use if I know a term, I will. I'm proud to use a Hebrew term, one of the 100 words or so that I master. It was really a fun year in Haifa, and it seems already like a century ago. Even though we came just back to Switzerland 2 years ago, and yeah, and I could tell a lot of funny stories. So, for example, in Switzerland, especially in the Reformed or Calvinist part, it's very common to give children like Hebrew names, first names, or biblical names. What is for us the Old Testament, and so our sons, they are called Solomon and Ezra, and this caused a lot of confusion when they came to school, because the teachers thought that we were the only Orthodox Jews in the school. And so they sometimes were saying, yeah, we know you're Orthodox, but we do this and this way, and I hope it's okay for you. So it was really a lot of confusion and a lot of fun stuff, yeah. But enough of small talk. And if you don't understand something that I'm saying, or a term that I'm using, you feel free to just interrupt me. Now I should make this full screen. Okay, I'm talking to you about early modern pilgrimage to Jerusalem and the importance of the Mediterranean Sea. As I assume that Yoni just told you, I'm an expert on early modern European history, and early modern, that's roughly from Columbus to the French Revolution, so from 1500 to 1800. When I speak about pilgrimage, I have to say I'm mostly an expert on Latin pilgrimage to the Holy Land. What is Latin? Latin basically means like Christian, but the Western sort of Christians. And so everything left from Romania, basically, or left from Greece. So the others, they are different types of Eastern Christians. And we, as historians, usually we use Latin Christians because it's less codified than to say Catholic Christians, because as you probably know, there was a thing called the Reformation in the 16th century. So Christianity split, Western Christianity split up. And usually, actually, the term Catholic should only be used after around 15 or after the 16th century. Before that, it was, we should better talk of Latin Christians. So it's basically all the Protestants and Catholics together, but not the Eastern Christians. so this is my expertise, but I'm also interested in Eastern Christianity and travel to the Holy Land by Jews and by Muslims and other people belonging to other religions. So let's see. So we are talking about the Mediterranean Sea and the importance of the Mediterranean Sea, and what is fascinating when we talk about pilgrimage to the Holy Land, which was practiced during the medieval and early modern period by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. And what is fascinating when we talk about the Mediterranean Sea is that none of the founders of those great monotheistic religions had a direct relationship to the Mediterranean. So neither Moses nor Jesus nor Mohammed, in none of these biographies, as they are traditioned, the Mediterranean Sea plays an important role. Nonetheless, the Mediterranean Sea was quickly became a part of all of those religions and also shaped their very outlook. For example, here we see in the first century of the Common Era, the travels of the Apostle Paul. He traveled widely. He was along the Mediterranean Sea, and his travels, they are recorded in the New Testament and in the Acts of the Apostles. And the Mediterranean Sea is and the geography of the Mediterranean plays an important role in structuring the narrative of early Christianity. And even the shipwreck, Paul was shipwrecked on Malta, near Malta, and even that shipwreck became a kind of an important part of the self-styling of Paul, and the Paul as a traveler, as a kind of later Odysseus, and of course also the biography of Rambam or Maimonides, who, as you probably know, was born in Cordoba in Spain, and then made a career in Egypt, and his alleged tomb is at the Kinneret. And so it's really a biography around the Mediterranean basin, and as Sarah Strumsa called it, Mediterranean thinker. And similar claims could be made about important Muslim philosophers who were often also travelers, like Ibn Khaldun and others. So what I just said about the inclusion of the Mediterranean Sea into the self-representation of those religions, here we see, for example, a woodcut. So it's a picture carved into wood and then pressed on paper around 1500, and this scene is a scene from the Gospels. So Peter sees Jesus and he asks whether he can join him, and he is walking on the water. And this scene happened at the Sea of Galilee, on the Kinneret. So but the ship is clearly a Mediterranean pilgrimage ship. It's not a ship typical for the Kinneret. It's a Mediterranean ship, and it has, as you see on the sails, it has the crosses of Jerusalem. So those crosses, a big cross and 4 small crosses in the corner. This is kind of like a stamp for pilgrims to Jerusalem. So you can even today you can have that tattooed on your arm, or if you've been to Jerusalem, or you would put that into your coat of arms. I'll show you some examples later on. So the pilgrimage ship was combined with a scene from the Kinneret. So And on the bottom, there's Jesus is conducting an exorcism. So there you see a demon flying out of the mouth of that person because he's possessed by some evil spirit. What's interesting about the most important sites of pilgrimage, of Christian pilgrimage, is that they are all on the periphery. So we would think that, like, what is really essential for your religious identity would be in the center of a certain area, right? But by far the most important pilgrimage destinations in Latin Christianity were in the south and on the periphery. So we have on the left, the three most important are Santiago de Compostela, so really in Spain, really on the left bordering on the Atlantic, and the place is even called End of the Earth, Finis Terrae. And then we have on the bottom Rome, of course, and on the right, Jerusalem. So they are all bordering, they are in the cosmological center, they are in the center of the import of the self-representation of those religions, all those three places, but they are geographically speaking at the periphery. And the anthropologist Victor Turner, he spoke therefore from the center out there. So it's a center, but at the periphery, which is kind of fascinating. So as Joni is a much better expert, I'll only briefly remember that there was an era of Latin, constant Latin military presence in the Levant, and also in the Holy Land. So these were the Crusader kingdoms, and their Jerusalem was lost again sooner, and the last stronghold in the Holy Land was and in the Levant was Akko, or Acre, and when it fell, 1291. There was no more military presence in the Holy Land, no constant presence. But what is interesting is that even though the era was over and the Levant and the Holy Land were now enemy territory in geostrategic terms, pilgrimage to the Holy Land quite soon restarted again. So people would go to the sites that were now under Muslim dominion, and even if they were at times also fighting wars against those different Muslim rulers. Nevertheless, the idea of crusade never entirely ceased. And this may be also a particular, many of the examples I'm presenting to you are from Switzerland. And this is not just because of local patriotism or something like that, but the Swiss are really, and the Southern German, and people from Southern Germany are really overrepresented for reasons we are not entirely sure why. It probably has to do with archives and tradition and writing cultures, obviously, but they are overrepresented. And in the case of the Swiss, they were not a real nation, and they had some complex. They were feeling inferior to others. So they had a real interest to present them all the time as a nation, and they would write in their pilgrimage account, the master of the ship from Venice, he really knew something about Switzerland, and he treated us very kind. And so they were really, they needed that. So whereas for a French, French were much more secure in their identity. So it probably also has to do with the nature of a would-be nation that wants to style itself as something real, right? And so this pilgrim is called Hans Stockar. He is from Schaffhausen at the border of today's Switzerland to Germany, and at the shores of the Rhine. And you see him, he's at once very pious, holding his hand over his heart, and he has the Jerusalem cross around his neck, and also at the top of the picture. But he's also carrying a sword, and this has also to do with some kind of Swiss self-representation, because in Switzerland around 1500 it was a very poor country, and they basically offered military and mercenary services to foreign major powers. So there was a strong military tradition, but it's also reconnecting to a Crusader tradition, and they always would complain when they reached the shores of Jaffa. They had to surrender their arms, because no Christians or Jews were allowed to carry arms, to bear arms in Muslim territory, and it was always a big deal for them. And then they said, yeah, we were unarmed, we had to travel from Yafo to Jerusalem. But back home, in self-representing himself, in having himself portrayed in a picture, the sword is important, and he was not. There are many other portraits like that. So how did that travel happen? So the people would. Actually, do you see my mouth? My mouse when I did the cursor? Okay. So you would go to Venice up here, and then you could book basically an all-inclusive travel. So you would go to Venice and say, I want to go to visit all the important holy places in the Holy Land, and then you could pay cash, and then this would cover almost everything. There were a little problem were the tips, and there was always complaining about the tips. Who is paying for the tips, or the bakshish or whatever? And but basically it was an all-inclusive package. So they were in Venice. You would go to Venice. You would make an arrangement with a patron, with a ship owner. And you would be brought to the Holy Land along the coast of the Dalmatia, the Greek islands, and Anatolia, and to Yafo. This is from a manuscript pilgrimage account from the late 16th century, this map, from a pilgrim from Fribourg in Switzerland. Yeah. So here we see a pilgrimage galley around 1500 by a German pilgrim in a manuscript account, and the pilgrim is called Konrad von Grünenberg. Several hundred people would fit into a pilgrimage galley like that, and there were also, you could see it very tiny. There were also animals aboard, and and quite a lot, because to feed several hundred people, you had to have a lot of livestock with you, and so those were also major farmhouses in a way, and it was quite tight and not really funny to be on one of those pilgrimage galleys. And the worst thing, as one very famous pilgrim, originally from Zurich, Felix Fabri, tells us, the worst thing by far was thirst. So water and water supply was always a problem. And he describes in a very fascinating and moving scene how he sees in the early morning the sheep licking the what's the word?
Dew.
The dew, exactly. Licking the dew from the wood of the ship because they were all so thirsty. Then in Jaffo, you would land in Jaffo, and when you had permission, you were allowed a land, and then they traveled to Rama, or Ramla, as it's sometimes called, and there they were registered. There was already a Franciscan, the Franciscans, the monks, Franciscan monks, friars. They were the only Latin people allowed to live constantly in the Holy Land, and they would fetch them at the shore, the pilgrims. And in Rama, they had a hospice. I think there is still a church today in Rama, but it's not the old one today. And they were also registered by the Ottoman or before that by the Mamluk authorities. And then they were brought to Jerusalem. Here we see from that same pilgrimage account by Sebastian Vera, the transfer from Jaffo to Jerusalem. So the pilgrims are riding here, and they are also often describing how they were maltreated by armed guards, Muslim guards. But we also always have to take that with a pinch of salt, because in self-representing them, they were also eager, like Christian pilgrimage was also about the idea of imitating Christ. So you would a bit do like, you would in a way like reenact the life of Jesus. And so being maltreated was also in a way important. So we should not just believe everything that it was really that they were always treated very badly. So, though of course sometimes they were. And here we see how that could work, like this reenactment of Jesus. A very famous scene in Christian iconography is the entrance into Jerusalem of Jesus on a donkey on, excuse me, on Palm Sunday, at the beginning of Holy Week, so around Pesach. And here we see a scene, Jesus entering Jerusalem on a donkey. And as you see on the bottom, there's again this Jerusalem cross. So this is a painted glass. And this was very stained glass window, and it was used as a gift for a monastery. It ornamented the cloister of a monastery in Switzerland, and it was a gift given by a certain Rudolf Pfiffer, and he was a pilgrim to the Holy Land. And in order to commemorate his pilgrimage to the Holy Land, he gave this painted glass window. They are very common in Switzerland around that time. But he also had himself remembered as a Jerusalem pilgrim, right? So it's about the life of Jesus, but it's also about his own honor. So it's both about, it's in a very complex way, it's about being proud and being humble at the same time, and commemorating the life of Jesus, but also commemorating one's own pilgrimage. Here, another painted stained glass window by another Swiss pilgrim, again, very military. And I don't have a color picture of this one, I'm sorry. But here you see also the lion holding up the coat of arms, and again, the Jerusalem cross. And the other one is the Order of Saint Catherine, another pilgrimage, important pilgrimage destination in the Levant. And on the top, you see the pilgrims entering Jerusalem on donkeys, and the Franciscan friars. Here, the Franciscan friars coming out of the city to greet them. And here you see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Now we come to the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean was of real importance to the pilgrimage, and this was really something new in a way when you compare it to like biblical or like biblical pilgrimage on Shavuot, right, and Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. Is there a fourth? I forgot.
No, Sukkot. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot.
Okay, thanks. And also, as the very word Aliyah la Regel, so it's the idea of walking, right? It's walking, and also in the Gospels, when Jesus went to Jerusalem, he went by foot, right, to the temple. And so this, but during the Middle Ages, this idea of going on water to the Holy Land became very pervasive, and it became even an integral part of pilgrimage, like going through water on water to the Holy Land. So, and there was an entire theology of water that developed around that. So the and we see here from that same pilgrimage account, as soon as he enters, the pilgrim writer, as he enters the ship, he starts with a new title page with this compass image of the different directions. So this is in the middle of the pilgrimage account, but at the beginning of his travel on sea, there's a new title page. And because water was so important, and there was not much to say about Jesus as a seafarer on the Mediterranean Sea, people looked to other stories, other biblical stories, and there is, of course, the story of Jonah. So here we see that's not medieval, that's late antique, that's a Roman sarcophagus from near Bath in today England. And it's the scene of Jonah. So we see here the Leviathan. Funnily enough, we don't see Jonah here thrown into the sea, but we see a ram on the top. So this may be, there are different interpretations, but this may be a kind of Christological symbol or like a kind of scapegoat that appeases the elements with God and the cosmological order. On the right, we see Jonah as he is on land and in the shade, awaiting the destruction. Oops, awaiting the destruction of Nineveh. And the scene of, so since late antiquity, the tale of Jonah was about, and already in the Gospels, in fact, the tale of Jonah was read as a kind of Christological account. So Jonah was 3 days in the belly of the whale, and Jesus died and was resurrected after 3 days. So that's a very important allegorical or reading, so the Jonah story became kind of like a tale about the resurrection, and already here in late antiquity in the Christian context. And here this was not restricted to Western Christianity, also in this famous Armenian church in today Turkey on Lake Van, an island on Lake Van, the church of Akdamar from the 10th century. Here we also see the ship and Jonah thrown into the mouth of the Leviathan, and here spit ashore and sitting or lying in the shade of the tree. And always also here it's about the resurrection. here that's closer to the time of which I'm an expert. This is an epitaph, so a picture painted for the site of at the site of or in remembrance of a pilgrim who died en route on the way back from the Holy Land. And for all travelers, Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, like dying at the high seas was a big problem, because you wanted to have a proper Jewish, Christian, Muslim burial in the earth, right? And but for practical reasons, it was often impossible to keep a dead body at sea. So they would nonetheless throw them into the water, either in a coffin like here, or just without the coffin, as one pilgrim said, for the sea beasts to devour. And here we see how the brother of this dead pilgrim, when he came back, he made it in a Jonah, with allusions to Jonah. He made it a scene about the resurrection. So here we see on the left, we see the soul rising from the sea and being resurrected. So the Jonah story is, in general, I think, very fun to think with when we think about the experiences at the high sea of pilgrims. And there are many motives. Gershom Scholem once, actually, he also studied in Bern, where I'm sitting right now. He said that Jonah is the prototypical story, or children's story. And I found, when reading through a lot of pilgrimage accounts, very often I'm not even sure whether those are quotes or allusions, or whether just like the Mediterranean life itself creates those kinds of similarities to the Jonah story. I'm assuming that you're all familiar with the story of Jonah, and we don't have really time to read that all, but I want to highlight just one passage. So in verse 5, Avia, could you read that in Hebrew, please?
Just the one that you
just number 5, yeah.
ויראו המלאכים ויזעקו איש אל אלוהיו ויתלו את הכלים אשר באונייה אל הים להקל מעליהם, ויונה ירד אל ירכתי הספינה וישכב וירדם.
Thanks so much. So what is interesting here is that every man cried to his own God, and so the ship was packed, and it's a real microcosm. So everyone praying to his own God. So a really Babylonian scene on the ship. So it's a floating, and pilgrims sometimes would also speak of a floating Babel or floating Babylon. And this we also have in contemporary writing, like in the 16th century, the Jean Bodin, that's a fictional text. He wrote about a scene at the high seas between Alexandria and Venice, and there he wrote about a storm. At first, the skipper had urged us to be courageous and hope for better things. When he fully realized the situation, he was terrified. He groaned and urged each one to pray to God. Then a certain Florentine began to call upon Catherine of Siena, another the Virgin of Loreto, very well known to this city. Many were praying to Nicholas, others to Clement. Several with mournful wails were singing Hail, Star of the Sea. The Greek merchants in the common speech began to repeat Soson Hemas, Kyrie, Eleison Hemas. Isaac Puson Despota, save us, O Lord, have mercy on us, hear us, O Master. The Jews were chanting again and again, Shema Adonai, hear, O Lord. The Ismailites of Alexandria were saying, Eyuche Echuche Nabudu Allah Allah Mala Rasulullah. It is you we worship, Allah Allah, Lord of the Prophet of Allah. So this is a fictional text, but we have similar accounts in pilgrimage accounts. Here from a Swiss pilgrim, he says that there were in some 213 people aboard, seamen, merchants, and a group of 11 pilgrims. The others were of many nations, such as Italians, French, Spaniards, Hebrews, or Jews. He uses both words. Armenians, Flemings, and we 8 Grisoni, or people from Graubünden. So it was really a very cosmopolitan and very tightly packed place. So how much more time do we have? Like 5 minutes? Was that still okay, Yoni?
Yes, I think five is okay. And then
okay.
We can do questions.
So as you know, they are casting lots in order to identify the culprit in the story of Jonah, right? And this they do also in when there's a storm or a calm, so no wind at all or too much wind. They also are looking for the culprit. So Pierre Barbatre, a French pilgrim, he says, some said that the calm was caused by the Jews on board who should be thrown into the sea. Others said that it was because of pilgrims who had taken water from Jordan with them, and that it was impossible to have good winds with Jordan water aboard. So very often there are raids on ships, and the baggage of pilgrims is searched for water from Jordan, because water from Jordan was very much feared by seamen. I have no accounts. I have several times they are deliberating about throwing religious minorities, either Jews or Muslims or Protestants or whatever minority is at hand overboard. But I have not found a passage where actual living human beings were thrown overboard. But it's sometimes deliberate. They are deliberating it, and sometimes they are even casting lots. So this pilgrim, this Lutheran pilgrim, he describes the scene where they cast lots in order to find the one who has to appease God. And he is afraid that he, as a Lutheran, as a Protestant, would be singled out in order to pay a very high sum to go on pilgrimage somewhere, or to be even killed. So this motive is pervasive. And finally, to come to an end, there are also episodes when they throw stuff overboard in order to appease God or the elements. So one thing pilgrims were very fond of, and until the early 19th century, you could buy in apothecaries or pharmacies in Europe, you could buy mumia. This was grinded mummy powder. So for medicinal purposes. And seamen were very afraid of that, and they said that causes storm. So water from Jordan and mumia causes storm. And one pilgrim from Zurich, this one, he is called Hans Jakob Ammann. His pilgrimage account is cast into shark skin. So he had his pilgrimage account printed and covered it in shark skin. This is it. And he gave it to the local library, and it's still excellent. It's still there. And he was forced to throw overboard a hand of a mummy during a storm, because the captain, he was very much afraid of that hand. And he said, I would like to have kept it as a souvenir, but because to prevent further inconveniences, and because this captain was so superstitious, I threw it overboard. And of course, as a surgeon, he had probably also a medicinal interest in that mummy hand. Another thing that would be thrown overboard were Agnus Dei. So those were small medallions stamped with wax with a lamb on it, with a Lamb of God, Christological figure. and they were blessed by the Pope himself. So people would wear that around their neck, and in moments of danger, you would throw it into the fire or into the sea. And this Swiss pilgrim, he says that between Cyprus and Crete, when the storm was very heavy, he had to throw his Agnus Dei, which was given to him by the Archbishop of Milan, and which was cast in gold and gems. He had to throw it into the sea. And he spoke a kind of formula, a magical formula, and immediately the ship, which was very much pressed to the side, stood up again. But and he has written about that a Latin account of this episode, and he had it sealed by all the important persons that were on sea, and also by a Jesuit priest, and so they all sealed and approved that miracle. So he had actual proof of that miracle. Yeah, so this was my short Tour d'Horizon on pilgrimage and the Mediterranean Sea. There would still be a lot to say. If you are interested, I can recommend the account of the pilgrimage account by Rabbi Moses Basola. There's a bilingual edition by David Abraham, and he has also shipboard advice to Jewish travelers on Christian pilgrimage galleys, which is very illuminating. So many thanks to your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Toda rabba. Thank you very much. I thought it was really fantastic. I mean, you opened up a lot of topics. So are there any questions or comments or ideas?
I have one, but can I ask it in Hebrew? Because I don't exactly know how to.
Okay, yeah, and I can translate.
Yeah, הקמעות האלה, לא הבנתי למה בדיוק הם חשבו שצריך להשליך אותם לים בשעה של סערה או משהו?
So Avia is asking what was the logic behind throwing these medallions into the sea? I mean, why were they supposed to calm the storm?
Yeah, what's the logic? Yeah, what's the logic? It's a very good question, but one very hard to answer. What I find interesting is that one gesture, like throwing something, like I mean, it's interesting anyway. Like in the Jonah stories, you have like 4 times or something the word throw, like God is throwing a storm upon the sea. Then the seamen are throwing stuff overboard to lighten the ship. Then they are casting lots or throwing lots, right? And then they are throwing Jonah overboard. So this idea of throwing something into the sea, it seems very pervasive. And I mean, there's also tashlich, right? But the logic seems to be quite different. Like in the case of the mummy, or Jonah, or Yonah, or water from Jordan, it seems to be something like bad, like something evil or sinful that is thrown overboard, and then the cosmological order is restored, right? Getting rid of the bad stuff. But like with the Agnus Dei, it's like something good that I have, and then I throw it into the sea and I tame it, right? So it's one gesture, it's the exact same gesture, but the logic is kind of different. One is I appease God, and the other is like I tame together with God, I tame the sea, right? The raging sea. So does that make a little bit more sense? I mean, yeah, it's in a way it's considered to be a magical a magical object that has power, right? And either you believe that or you don't. But the objects function differently. You're right.
Okay, thank you.
עוד שאלות? Any other questions? So maybe I can ask something. Can you say anything about evidence for Jewish-Christian interaction on ships, or maybe on sometimes conflicts, problems that have to do with kosher food, maybe, or things that have to do with other religious practices, problems of purity, maybe, or?
Yeah. I mean, there are not so many Hebrew or Jewish travel accounts, so that's a bit of a problem. But there's Rabbi Ovadia. He is describing a scene with Meshulam of Volterra, and they had a fight because Meshulam of Volterra, he was an important merchant, and he had privileges like other important and rich people aboard. He had privileges, and so some passengers would get angry that the patron of the ship, like the shipmaster, would treat a Jew so. Or no, the ship's crew was getting angry that the shipmaster should treat a Jew with privileges, right? And so one of the crew members was insulting Meshulam, and then the captain said, "Hey, you are not obeying my orders." And he had this seaman, he had him tied to the mast and beaten up, right? And then a big, almost mutiny arose because the other seamen, they were backing up their beaten up comrade and said, "Yeah, we won't tolerate this." And so. After that, it was more or less peaceful, but the situation was really tight then on board. So we had different stakeholders. On kosher food, yeah, there's in this passage I just showed by Rabbi Moses Basola, who actually is supposed to come originally from Basel. That's why he's got this name Basola. He describes how you can, for an extra tip, you can have your own cook, or you're allowed to cook your food yourself in the kitchen. And for another tip, that you will be protected from nuisance against committed by other pilgrims, right? So the pilgrim galley, in a way, was very convenient, but it was also not so fun, probably, as a Jew to travel on a pilgrim galley, because they were repeating the story of the Passion all the time, and they were talking about how the Jews maltreated Christ, and they were going to the holy places, right? So it was it could be a tight situation. And there are in some pilgrimage accounts, they have the Christian pilgrimage accounts, they have the contracts between the shipmaster and the pilgrims inside. And some of them have a special article in the contract that no Jews should be allowed to be aboard that ship. But sometimes on the high seas, they found out there were Jews nonetheless aboard. And after the Reformation, the situation, and after the Protestant Reformation, but later on also after the Catholic Reformation, things become really weird, because you don't have anymore those big pilgrimage galleys, you have smaller ships. And in one episode, for example, the Greek shipmaster, he's Greek Orthodox, an Eastern Christian, he is afraid to go out because it's the holy day of Saint Nicholas. But then there are Catholics aboard, and the Catholics have already adopted the Gregorian calendar. And he says, we don't care. It's not you don't have the right calendar anyway. It's not the day of Saint Nicholas. It's just a normal day. The day of Saint Nicholas was 10 days ago. and then there is also an Ottoman official on that ship, and he cares neither for the Gregorian calendar nor the Julian calendar, and says, I just want to leave Cyprus now, and you better do it. and so it's so like observing holy days was a problem at any rate for everybody at the high seas. It was also a problem for Christians because they were not allowed, or they thought they were not allowed. It's not actually a canonical order by the Catholic Church, but they thought they were not allowed to celebrate the Eucharist on ship. So and the Eucharist was also something that would give you comfort, right, in moments of danger or something like that. So they were barred from. So, and Felix Fabri nicely describes it. It's like an existence between death and life. So being at the high seas, you are not a person anymore, a human being in a normal way anymore. You are really in a liminal stage, and the normal laws don't apply here anymore.
אוקיי. שאלות נוספות או הערות? לא. תראו, אני רוצה אולי, אני אגיד 3 או 4 משפטים. Zuna, allow me to say in Hebrew a couple of words to kind of sum up some of the things you've said, I think in a way that might be helpful to some of the students. אז תראו, בעצם אני חושב שראינו פה לפחות 3 דברים מרכזיים שאתם, שוב, אני יודע שאולי לא הבנתם כל מילה או כל מושג, אבל 3 דברים מרכזיים שהיה אפשר לראות פה, שאני חושב שהם מעניינים. קודם כל ראינו סוגים של דימוי, של הסיפור של צליינות ודימוי עצמי. נכון, איך האיש שחזר מהמסע דואג שיציירו אותו, איך הוא דואג שהוא או אחרים יכתבו את הדבר הזה וזה יהיה בארכיון של המשפחה, כן? כלומר זה חלק מהדימוי העצמי שלו, וכן חוקרים, אנחנו מתעניינים מאוד באיך אנשים מנסים לסרטט את עצמם. כן, ואתם רואים, וזה גם קשור לאומנות, כן? כי חלק מהסיפור פה הוא סיפור אומנותי, אני משלם על חלון יפה כזה לכנסייה, וזה ינציחו שם את השם שלי ואת המשפחה שלי, ויראו אותי באיזשהו אופן. דבר שני שראינו זה כמובן המון חומר שנוגע לפרקטיקות של מסע, הסיפור הזה של איך נראית האונייה, וכמה אנשים יש עליה, ומה הם אוכלים, וכמה חיות יש, ואיזה הסכם הם חותמים עם הקברניט, וכל הדברים האלה, כלומר המון חומר על פרקטיקה. מה עושים כשמישהו מת על האונייה, כן? והוא באמת רק נגע בדברים האלה, אבל אתם רואים שיש פה הרבה מאוד חומר ושאלות. והציר האחרון שהייתי מסתכל עליו, זה הציר של החומרים בכלל שהוא עובד איתם. יצירות אומנות, כתבי יד, מפות, חומרים, כן, אנחנו קוראים לזה מטריה מדיקה, כן, המומיה, כן, כל מיני פשוט חומרים שנשארו בכל מיני מקומות, כן, הדברים האלה שאנשים הביאו מהארץ, כן, כלים למים קדושים, כל מיני דברים כאלה, כן, זה גם, כן, ציר מאוד מעניין של העבודה, בעצם עם איזה חומר הוא עובד, כן, שאתם שומעים היסטוריון, חלק מה שאתם צריכים לשאול זה עם מה הוא עובד. אוקיי, אז אני חושב שהייתה פה, זה מאוד מבואי, כן, אבל היה פה הרבה מאוד בעצם נושאים וסוגיות וחתכים בעצם שהוא פתח בפנינו. אוקיי? So I try to sum up some of the things you've said, but I think it was fascinating. I mean, some of the stuff you've shown is really remarkable, and I really enjoyed it tremendously. And I'm very happy that you agreed to speak in our forum. So if there are no further comments or questions, we can you can join me in thanking. Rachel, you want to ask something?
Yeah, just now it came to me. Why I can understand the mummy, why that would be bad, but why would the water from the Jordan, which is considered holy water, why would that be bad for the journey and cause a storm?
Yeah, I don't have a simple answer to this, or it's a riddle for me also. I think it has something to do with Jordan water as being particularly adjective in a way. So in the Psalms, you have this Psalm, I forgot the number, like when the children of Israel came to the Holy Land, the sea rejoiced, the sea clasped, I think, and Jordan saw it and rose up or something like that. And in later on, when in Christian iconography of the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist, you see sometimes Jordan, impersonification of Jordan like being a bearded man who turns away from Jesus. And this was also linked with Jesus is Yeshua, it's also Joshua, right? Joshua going through Jordan and the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark, it's also the Ark of Noah, right? It's the ship. And so there's something about Jordan that is it's in a way holy, but it's also kind of dangerous and not controllable. Like he has agency of himself. It's like a person, and it's not the pilgrim. They want desperately to bring Jordan water back home, because to this very day, even in the 21st century, the kings of England, they are baptized with water that contains water from Jordan. So this was, and there were, Felix Fabry writes that around 1500, there were people who thought that Christian baptism was invalid if it did not contain some drops of water from Jordan. So the pilgrims themselves, they had no problem with it. They desperately clung to it, but the seamen, they thought that they needed it. And there is something really ambiguous about the religious object. I mean, also the relic itself, very often they were in fact stolen, right? So, but this made them also thieves. And so and in late antiquity, we have I forgot now which writer, it's Clement of Alexandria, or one of the patristical writers. He writes about the scene like when they would go to Jordan on Epiphany, on the day of the baptism of Jesus. They would go to Jordan, they would get water from Jordan, and later on seamen would put water from Jordan on their ships to make them unsinkable. So it's, in a way, it can be good. It can also be very bad. It's really fascinating. Yeah. This ambiguity of the relic or the holy object.
I know that in German there is a saying that you go across the Jordan, über den Jordan gehen, and that actually means to die. So maybe it has something to do with that.
Well, I think that's just like going to the promised land.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to also in English. Yeah, it's also in a lot of spirituals in English, you have the idea of crossing Jordan.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much to everyone, and especially to Sundar for really a fantastic talk with a lot of things to think about now. And see you all later.
Thank you very much.
Yom Tov.
Yom Tov.
Bye-bye.
Bye.